A somber and humble Diana Lovejoy is led into court in shackles.
At one point, Diana Lovejoy completely passed out. Diana Lovejoy would regain consciousness. Then she was bound by her feet and her hands and led out of court by firefighters. Back in court, Weldon McDavid Jr. was convicted on all counts of attempted murder, conspiracy to murder, and assault with a deadly weapon charges. Jurors spoke about how they were able to come to a swift conviction, finding both Lovejoy and McDavid working together, trying to kill Lovejoy's ex-husband, Gregory Mulvihill.
He didn't miss. He hit him center mass, but he moved.
We have to put what happened, that it was an attempted murder, and that Mr. Mulvihill did luckily survive this, but this could have been a very different outcome.
To understand the attempted murder of Greg Mulvihill, you have to understand the mind of the woman who designed it. Diana Lovejoy didn't live in the world of emotion. She lived in the world of documentation. As a high-earning technical writer in Carlsbad, California, her entire professional life was dedicated to taking chaos and turning it into a manual. She was the one who explained how complex systems worked, how to troubleshoot errors, and, most importantly, how to delete what wasn't functioning. By 2016, Greg Mulvihill was the primary system error in her life. Their marriage hadn't just ended, it had imploded into a radioactive legal battle. This wasn't a fight over a toaster or a car. This was a war over a $120 million marital estate. We are talking about luxury real estate, a massive stock portfolio, and offshore holdings. But while the money was staggering, the real conflict was biological, their young son. Diana didn't want to share. In her mind, Greg was a bug in the software of her motherhood. She began a campaign of total character assassination, accusing Greg of horrific abuse against both her and their son, claims that were later investigated and found to be completely fabricated. When the court saw through the lies and ordered joint custody, along with a $120,000 equalization payment Diana had to pay to Greg, her logical mind reached a final, lethal conclusion. If she couldn't win in court, she would simply remove the other party from the server. Diana didn't go to the dark web or look for a career criminal. A technical writer looks for a specialist. She began frequenting a local gun range in Oceanside, not just to learn to shoot, but to find a weapon in human form. That is where she met Weldon McDavid Jr. McDavid was the perfect precision instrument. He was 50 years old, a former Marine Corps School of Infantry instructor, and a world-class marksman. He was a man whose entire life was built on the concepts of honor, protection, and the warrior's path. But he had a flaw that Diana spotted immediately, a massive hero complex. Diana didn't offer him money at first. She offered him a mission. She spent months at the range, technical writing a fictional version of her life for him. She played the damsel in distress with clinical perfection. She told him Greg was a child molester who had escaped justice. She told him she lived in constant terror. She didn't ask him to kill. She asked him to protect her. She weaponized his Marine training, convincing this veteran that Greg Mulvihill was a target that the law was too weak to handle. She moved him from firearms instructor to lover, and finally to assassin. The planning phase for the hit on Greg Mulvihill was a masterclass in hubris. Diana and Weldon believed they were smarter than the Carlsbad Police Department. They implemented a burner protocol. On a Tuesday afternoon, Diana drove to an Oceanside Best Buy. Forensic evidence would later show she was hyper-aware of the store's CCTV. She wore a wide-brimmed sun hat and oversized sunglasses, the technical writer's version of a disguise. She paid cash for 2 burner phones, believing this created a digital air gap that would make their communications untraceable. But while they were obsessed with the burner phones, they were sloppy with their primary devices. Investigators would later find that Diana and Weldon's personal cell phones were handshaking with the same towers as the burner phones. Every time they met to discuss the murder, their digital shadows followed them. They were effectively GPS tagging their own conspiracy. Weldon's contribution to the plan was the hardware. He didn't choose a handgun, which is messy and inaccurate at distance. He chose an AR-15, a rifle he had personally customized with a suppressor or silencer. In the world of ballistics, a suppressor doesn't make a gun silent. It changes the acoustic signature. It turns a sharp crack into a dull thump, making it impossible for a target to know where the shot is coming from in the dark. Weldon spent weeks zeroing the rifle, ensuring that from 50 yards he could put a bullet through a quarter. In his mind, Greg Mulvihill was already a ghost. The kill zone was chosen with the same tactical precision. They needed a place that was off the grid. No cameras, no street lights, and multiple escape routes into the brush. They settled on a remote dirt access road off Avenida Encinas. At the end of that road stood a utility pole, designated in police reports as Pole 43. This was the X on their map. The lure was a psychological masterstroke. Diana knew Greg was desperate for evidence to clear his name of the false abuse allegations. Weldon, using one of the burner phones, called Greg. He used a pseudonym, Ben. He told Greg he was a whistleblower with the goods on Diana, documents that would prove she had fabricated the abuse claims and was hiding millions in assets. "Meet me at Pole 43 at 11 p.m., Weldon said. "Come alone. Bring a light." The package is taped to the back of the pole. It was the perfect trap. It targeted Greg's hope. It was the only thing that could get a cautious man to drive to a dark road in the middle of the night. On September 1st, 2016, as the sun set over Carlsbad, Diana Lovejoy sat in her mansion, checking her watch. The system update was about to begin. What Diana and Weldon didn't account for was the biological cost of a murder. Weldon McDavid, for all his Marine training, made a series of amateur mistakes that would eventually hang them both. While scouting the site, Weldon actually left human feces in the bushes, where he planned to lie in wait. He didn't think twice about it, but in the world of 2016 forensics, that was a goldmine of DNA. He also brought a simple white towel to the scene, and intended to rest the barrel of his rifle on to stabilize his shot. That towel, left behind in the post-shooting chaos, would become the smoking gun. As 11 p.m. approached, Weldon hiked into the brush, his suppressed AR-15 at the ready. He was in full camouflage, a ghost in the weeds. He waited for the headlights. He waited for the man he believed was a monster. And back at home, Diana Lovejoy sat on her computer, creating a browsing history alibi, waiting for the text message that would confirm she was finally a $120 million widow. The night of September 1st, 2016, was moonless, leaving the dirt access road off Avenida Encinas in a state of absolute ink-black darkness. This was precisely what Weldon McDavid had calculated for. He was already in position, prone in the scrub brush, approximately 50 yards from Pole 43. He wasn't just a man with a gun. He was a tactical entity. He was wearing full-body camouflage, his breathing was slow and rhythmic, and his suppressed AR-15 was rested on a white towel to ensure a stable, match-grade shot. In his mind, he was on a combat mission, and the rules of engagement had already been defined by Diana Lovejoy. Back at the $120 million estate, Diana was meticulously curating her alibi. She wasn't just sitting idle. She was performing for the digital record. She was browsing the web, clicking through emails, and ensuring her home IP address was logging constant activity. She believed that as long as her primary phone and laptop remained at home, her physical presence was irrelevant. She was the ghost in the machine, but she had underestimated the digital handshake. At 11:12 p.m., when headlights cut through the darkness of the access road, Greg Mulvihill's car crunched over the gravel. But Weldon saw a variable he hadn't planned for through his optic: 2 heat signatures. Greg hadn't come alone. He had brought his friend, Jason Shore. In a high-stakes hit, a witness usually complicates the math, but for Weldon, the hero narrative was too strong. He stayed in the nest. Greg stepped out of the car, clutching a high-powered tactical flashlight. He was terrified, but the lure of incriminating evidence against Diana was a pull he couldn't resist. He called out for Ben, the pseudonym Weldon had used on the burner phone. Silence. Only the sound of the wind through the power lines. Greg began walking toward the utility pole. Jason followed a few steps behind. As Greg reached the pole, Jason flicked on the flashlight. The 1,000-lumen beam cut a jagged path through the darkness, sweeping across the very brush where Weldon lay hidden. Weldon realized his window was closing. The light was dancing dangerously close to his position. He centered the illuminated crosshairs of his scope on Greg's center mass. He didn't aim for the head, a risky shot in the dark. He aimed for the torso, the largest target area, designed for a high-probability kill. He squeezed the trigger. The suppressed thump of the AR-15 was almost entirely masked by the ambient noise of the night. The .223 caliber round shattered the air at 3 times the speed of sound, but in the exact microsecond the firing pin struck the primer, Greg Mulvihill flinched. The glare of the flashlight reflecting off the metallic surface of the pole caused him to pivot his body. The bullet, not intended to pierce his heart, instead tore through his left side. It shattered 3 ribs, obliterated soft tissue, and exited his back. Greg didn't even hear the shot. He felt a white-hot punch that knocked the air from his lungs. "I'm hit! I'm hit!" Greg screamed. The chaos was instantaneous. Greg and Jason dove into the dirt, scrambling wildly toward the car. Weldon McDavid watched through the scope as his perfect deletion struggled in the dirt. He had a choice: stay and finish the job with a second shot, potentially alerting the neighborhood, or retreat and hope the trauma was fatal. He chose the latter. He packed his gear with military precision, but in the darkness and the adrenaline, he made the error that would end his freedom. He left the white towel in the brush. By 11:30 p.m., Carlsbad was crawling with police. Juan Greg was rushed to the hospital, barely clinging to life. The investigators on the scene were baffled. There were no shell casings. Weldon had used a brass catcher on his rifle. There were no footprints in the hard-packed dirt. It looked like a ghost had pulled the trigger. But the technical writer and the marksman had left a digital wake. The following morning, detectives began the tower dump. They analyzed every single device that had pinged the cell towers near the crime scene. They found the burner phone, the Ben phone, used to lure Greg. But they didn't just look at the calls. They looked at the IMEI metadata. They found that this burner phone had been powered on for the first time just miles away from Diana Lovejoy's home. Even more damning, the FBI's cybercrimes unit performed a co-location analysis. They found that the burner phone and Diana's personal iPhone had traveled the exact same path to an Oceanside Best Buy 3 days prior. When they pulled the CCTV from that Best Buy, they didn't find a shadow. They found Diana Lovejoy wearing a floppy sun hat, paying cash for the very phone that had lured Greg to his near death. While the digital net was closing, the physical evidence arrived from the lab. The white towel found in the sniper's nest wasn't just a piece of fabric. Forensic technicians found a single microscopic skin cell. They ran the profile through CODIS. The match was a 1 in a trillion hit. Weldon McDavid. The Carlsbad police didn't move immediately. They watched, they listened, and they intercepted encrypted messages where Diana and Weldon discussed the unfortunate survival of the target. They watched as Diana played the role of the concerned ex-wife, visiting the police station to check on the progress of the case. She was still technical writing her way through the investigation, unaware that the system had already identified her as the primary glitch. When the tactical teams finally hit Diana's mansion and Weldon's workspace, they found the arsenal. Hidden in a secret compartment in Weldon's garage was the suppressed AR-15. Ballistics testing confirmed it was a match. The perfect crime had left a trail of data and DNA that was impossible to delete. When the Carlsbad detectives brought Diana Lovejoy into the interrogation room, they didn't see a grieving mother. They saw a technical writer who had finally run out of variables to control. Diana sat with her hands folded, her posture perfect, her voice a calm, professional hum. She had spent her life documenting systems, and she believed she could troubleshoot the detectives' questions. "I was at home," she stated, her eyes steady. "My computer logs will show I was online all night. I have no idea who this Ben is." The detectives didn't argue. They simply laid out a series of printouts. First, the CCTV stills from Best Buy. "Is this you, Diana? In the floppy hat?" Diana didn't flinch. She looked at her own image with the detachment of a stranger. Then came the co-location data. The detectives showed her a map where her personal iPhone and the burner phone moved in perfect synchronization. A digital heartbeat that proved she was the one who purchased the lure. But the most devastating blow came from Weldon McDavid. Unlike Diana, Weldon's warrior code had shattered under the weight of a life sentence. In a separate room, the marksman was talking. He described the grooming, the manipulation, and the promise of a payout from her $120 million estate. He admitted to the hit, but he offered a final, desperate defense. "I'm the best shot in the world. If I wanted him dead, he'd be dead." It was a warning shot. The trial in 2017 was a masterclass in forensic reconstruction. The prosecution brought in ballistics experts to dismantle Weldon's warning shot theory, and they used laser trajectory mapping to show that from the sniper's nest to pole 43, the bullet's path was a straight line to Greg's heart. At 50 yards in near total darkness, with a suppressed weapon, the expert testified, there is no such thing as a warning shot to the torso. The defendant aimed to kill. The victim is alive only because he flinched at the exact millisecond the primer was struck. The jury watched as the digital evidence was presented. The encrypted messages weren't so encrypted after all. Investigators had recovered deleted files from Diana's laptop, searches for untraceable poisons, how to hire a hitman, and the legal definition of a widow's rights to an estate. The technical writer had documented her own motive and her own methodology. The climax of the case occurred on November 13, 2017. The courtroom was packed with media, drawn by the story of the millionaire mastermind. Diana Lovejoy stood next to her lawyers, her face a mask of corporate stoicism. She still believed her intellect and her wealth would provide a bug fix for the verdict. The court clerk began to read, "On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant, Diana Lovejoy, guilty." The reaction was instantaneous. As the second guilty for attempted murder was read, the $120 million facade didn't just crack, it imploded. Diana's eyes rolled into the back of her head. Her body went limp, and she slid off her chair like a marionette with its strings cut. She hit the courtroom floor with a sickening thud, a system crash witnessed by millions on live television. Today, in 2026, the $120 million empire is a ghost. The massive estate was liquidated to cover the millions in legal fees for both the criminal trial and the subsequent civil suits. Diana Lovejoy is now inmate number WA3856 at the Central California Women's Facility. She is 52 years old, serving 26 years to life. Her days of technical writing in gated mansions have been replaced by a 6-by-9-foot cell in a prison uniform. Weldon McDavid, the hero who thought he was fighting a private war, is serving 50 years to life. His military honors were stripped away by the reality of his actions. He remains in a maximum security facility, a man who traded his honor for a woman who viewed him as nothing more than a disposable tool. Greg Mulvihill survived. He raised his son far away from the shadows of Carlsbad and the mother who tried to delete him. He remains a living testament to the fact that even the most calculated, high-tech plans are no match for the simple, messy persistence of the truth. The technical writer wrote her final chapter, but it was a life sentence she never intended to document. The case of Diana Lovejoy serves as a chilling reminder that high intelligence and high net worth are no armor against justice. Diana believed she could document a murder as easily as a software manual, and Weldon McDavid believed his military training placed him above the laws of the land. In the end, they weren't undone by a single mistake, but by 1,000 digital and biological footprints they left across the California coast. The $120 million estate is gone. The corporate careers are over. All that remains is the cold, hard data of a life sentence. If you want to see more forensic autopsies into the minds of the world's most calculated culprits, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Cold Trail Crimes. We don't just tell the story, we follow the evidence wherever it leads, no matter how deep the trail goes. Thanks for watching and stay sharp. The truth is always in the details.